What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the Interstate Mets Report. And as you can tell, our setup is a little bit different. Today, we have a special guest, JNY Sports, regular listener of the podcast. And he is very kind enough to join us today on today's segment. How are you? I guess I never really caught your name. What can I call you? Or can I just call you JNY? What can I call you?
Well, Jay's fine. Jay's fine. But yeah,
Jay's
I've
fine.
been listening to you guys for I think the past 2 months. I appreciate the honesty that you guys bring to the table. You guys seem like pretty big Met fans, so I don't think you're doing this for clout. Obviously, you want to get your stuff out there, but I just like you guys' opinion. It's an easy listen, and it's not like some of the other stuff that I see on social media. So yeah, that's why I'm a regular listener. I try to listen to you guys as much as I can. So yeah, happy to be on, and thanks for inviting me.
Of course, definitely appreciate the support, and you are always welcome on the channel. You're always welcome to come by, stop by whenever you want. We can easily set that up, and that goes for anybody who is listening as well, our regular listeners. If someone wants to come up and voice their opinions on whatever topics we got going on, definitely will extend that shout out to them as well and that opportunity. So make sure you follow Jay on Twitter at JNY Sports _ that's on Twitter, and subscribe to his YouTube as well. I know you make some hype videos. I've been checking out some of your YouTube content as well. You dropped some videos. I think you dropped one a couple weeks ago that I checked out, and it was very nice. And I definitely appreciate those videos as well. It's nice to get some of those videos. It gets me a little riled up. It gets me a little hype. So I like that. I can appreciate that. So follow Jay on Twitter at JNY Sports _ and at JNY Sports on YouTube. Subscribe to his channel. He has his own stuff going on as well. Go ahead, if you're listening to this, go ahead and subscribe. As always, make sure you're following the Interstate Mets Report on Twitter at Interstate Mets. My Twitter and Instagram is at CPNY Sports. My handle all across the board is at CPNY Sports. My YouTube is that as well. And obviously, we got Nelson. You got to subscribe to Nelson's YouTube. It's at Amish Country Mets Fan. I know you're closing in on 200 subscribers, Nelson. Huge feat. Definitely, like, since I've met you, I think you were at like 85. And to get you up 100 in the past couple of months I've known you, you've been doing some tremendous work. So shout out to you. Get him to 200. Let's get him there real quick. And then he also has Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok at Amish Country Mets Fan. And his Twitter handle is a little bit different. I'm assuming for the same reason Jay's is. It's Amish Country Met on Twitter. So go ahead and follow him there. So let's get into some topics today. We got our shameless plugging out the way. Let's get into some topics. We got three main topics that we're going to be going over. I'm very curious to get your opinion, Jay, on the Mets, especially obviously at this point in the season. We are where we're at right now. 7 games back last time I checked of the wild card. And like you said, I appreciate you acknowledging, like, Nelson and I, we do this because we love this team and we want to report and give our analysis as non-biasedly as possible. So when they're stinking it up, we're going to call it out. And if they're playing well, we're going to give them their props where props are due. It's not looking too good in terms of where we're at about a week before the trade deadline. So let's get into it. Obviously, we can get into some trade deadline talk as well. We can go a little bit off script, but today we got a couple topics here for you all. Today we're going to be going over the Mets Red Sox review series. Is a little bit of a disappointing series. We'll be talking some Subway Series action starting tonight, and then we'll go over some free agent pitching market, maybe some potential targets for the Mets this offseason, obviously headlined by Shohei Ohtani. But Jay, let's start off with you at this topic. Mets, Red Sox, obviously won game one. It was the rain-out game one. Uh, and then you had the whole doubleheader kind of day night, whatever. And then you had the disappointing rubber match on Sunday night with Carlos Carrasco only going 2 1/3. What did you see in that series? Maybe positives, if you have any. I'm not sure if you have any, and I won't fault you if you don't. But definitely some negatives and maybe some players to call on. Who were you most disappointed with?
Well, for context, Chris, I just want to be honest. It's been like a roller coaster this season. I'm 42, so I've been rooting for the Mets for a long time. So nothing really surprises me, and in my like this year especially, I've been trying to just temper everything, trying to see things from a broader perspective. So I don't want to like overreact to every single series because it's baseball. It's 162. You can't do that. You're going to kill yourself. That's why the good teams seem to rise to the top after a long season because it's 162. It's like no other sport. So for this weekend, it was a disappointment. I kind of like scheduled my weekend around all three games because it was a big series. I was a bit disappointed with the previous series because I thought we were gonna um, do a bit better. But versus the Red Sox, I really felt like it was a matchup we could do well and at least take 2 or 3. First game was great. We came back. I was pumped. Rain delay made it a bit awkward for Saturday because you had to watch the first game. But I was pumped because they won, and then we had Max at the evening game. So I went into that game pretty confident, and I was really because I'm rooting for these guys. I don't like bashing players. It's a hard game. I know they're making tons of money, but I'm still rooting for these guys. I'm a Met fan, so for Max, I really wanted him to at least go 6, maybe 1 or 2 runs, and just keep us in the game. But it just seemed like every single time the Mets did anything, he just gave it up, and that's been his MO for the whole season. And honestly, since that Braves series last year. And I don't know if it's New York. I don't know if it's old age. It's just like the whole season, I guess, could be described with that game too. Like why we haven't been able to get over that hump and really make a push. Because I'm not giving up. I don't know if I'm an optimist. I don't know if I'm an idiot. I'm not giving up, but it's just that the whole season for the Mets, I could just watch that game Saturday night. I was home. I watched the whole entire game. I didn't turn it off because I didn't want to give up on them. But I was like, yeah, this is why we're towards the bottom of the league. That's why we're 8 games out right now of the wild card, and it just doesn't look good. And I was really looking for that. And then Sunday, it was pretty much over early, but I still again watched it with Carrasco. I don't know if it's age. I don't know what's going on. It's just we have a very old team as far as pitching is concerned, and it was really highlighted over the weekend. So disappointment would be the word I would use for the weekend series.
No, and I definitely agree with you. It was as 2023 Mets as you can get. I think Nelson said that yesterday when we did the Mets Roundtable podcast with Mets Talk with Hayden and Talking Mets with Rob. That series and that game too, like you just said, was the whole entire story of this season so far with this team. Before we get to Nelson, we got our man Stevie Mac 23 following the stream. Appreciate you tuning in. He says, "What's up, dudes?" And we got some breaking news straight from our
Oh
listeners. We
wow!
got Kike Hernandez just got traded to the Dodgers. So the trading season is already starting to begin. So appreciate Stevie Mac breaking that news for us. Obviously, if there's anything else during this stream that happens, please inform us. We'll toss it up on the screen. As always, comment your thoughts. We'll discuss it. Everybody's welcome to have a voice and opinion on our streams. We always welcome that. So Nelson, I see the car has stopped. We're practicing safe driving. I love it. Let me hear your thoughts on the Red Sox and Mets series. And like Jay said, that Dodgers series and that Red Sox series combined was just absolute disappointments and just emulated this team so far this season. So what up, Nelson? How are you, my co-host? Shout out to you as well. Good to hear from you.
Hey, how's it going? Good to have you, Jay. Yeah, little last minute stuff going on. I actually wasn't driving, so we're all good, but we're good now. um, uh, yeah, stuff came up, little emergency, but we're all good. As far as the Mets and Red Sox, I mean, I hate this because I feel like I'm repeating myself constantly, but it's just like there's nothing else to say. The Mets have been a disappointment. They look the they haven't looked any better at all since like it's April was the last time this team looked like a good baseball team. Um, Max, like you said, just anytime it seems like there's a game that's has some sort of implications that means something, he has issues. And this this he definitely didn't. I don't remember him being this way with the Nationals. I know he had some issues in the playoffs at times, but he he used to step up. And I mean, granted, he is old. I get it, but man, that's not what we paid this dude $43 million for. So it's rough to see. Um, Cookie's Cookie. He's a fifth starter. You can't. I mean, you can't rail on, pile up on him too much. But it's like he needs to at least give us a shot, and he didn't on Sunday. Um, I mean, we could have easily got swept, which is kind of sad considering how bad the Red Sox played. It's not like they played great crisp baseball either. They were getting I mean, they could have scored way more runs on Sunday. They got thrown out at the bases like 3 or 4 times. Um, it's just the Mets just couldn't capitalize. You can't, and it's been that way all season. They can't capitalize on mistakes. When the offense shows up, the pitching does it. When the pitching shows up, the offense does it, and it's just round and round we go. So, I mean, I tried. Chris, we've been doing this for a while now. I tried to remain like pretty positive for through most of May. I think I made it till June, and once June came around, it was just I wasn't seeing things change. I went to that Pirates series in Pittsburgh, and they looked abysmal, and that's when I really started to turn on this team and be like, yeah, I don't think this is the year for these guys. And I've maintained that. I know some people don't like to hear it. Some people want to be more positive, but I got to go by what I see, and what I see is not a good baseball team. And I can't tell you the reasons. If we knew the reasons, we'd probably be millionaires and wouldn't be sitting here just talking about it. But yeah, that's rough series. But what are we gonna do? It's not like I expected much different either.
Yeah, no, and to both of your guys' point, it's just the inconsistency from the start of the season has just been so detrimental to this team. I mean, in the beginning, the offense started off slow. Pitching was fine. Bullpen was great. Obviously, towards the middle, the offense started to decline. The bullpen is now outside of Robertson, Rayleigh, and I mean, honestly, those two guys have been the carriers of the bullpen. You got Trevor Gott now was it as a guy who I want to mention, in this Red Sox series, who just absolutely deflated any sort of chances of the Mets winning a ball game. And he's done so for the last at least week, ever since he joined the Mets from the Mariners in that trade. Carrasco, I mean, how many times did I say this season about Carrasco? Every time I see his name up there on the pitching preview, it's just like I I'm almost inclined to pencil it in as an L, and I will watch him pitch, but the thing is that he throws 91, 92, if that, and he has no life on any of his pitches anymore. And it's just a shame because he's batting practice out there for those guys on the opposite team. It's just basically batting practice. In a World Series contending team, you cannot afford to throw someone like that out every fifth day where every game means something, especially not down this race right now. I mean, Jay just said it. He's remaining positive on the season, which is great because the Mets are still only technically 7 games back of the wild card. And it is 7. I did just check it. It is 7. And like, yeah, we look like crap, and this is not a World Series contending team. But when you look at the deadline versus where we're at, I mean, they win 3 more games. They pick up 3 games, maybe even 2 games in the loss column or the win column for the wild card. My line of demarcation in terms of not being sellers was 5 games. And I said that on a different podcast, but I said 5 games. And they're right there within striking distance to make that happen. Now, it gets to a point in a different conversation, Nelson. We've had this conversation for a while now. Should they versus will they is a whole different, ball game when you're talking about the differences between the two. Is should they versus will they? Should they be sellers? Yes, 100%. Should they be buyers? No, not at all. Because listen, I don't think that there's just too much to buy for this team to get to where it needs to be at in comparison to a team like, let's face it, the Braves, who are probably one of the most complete teams in the NL. And I hate to say it, but it is true. And it's been that way for quite some time now, the last couple of years. So it's a lot of differences in sort of philosophies. And I know Mets fans, we all have egos. We all want the Mets. We want to see the Mets in the playoffs because it's going to be a long offseason if they're not going to be in it. But the Mets still have a competitive year ahead of them in 2024, and I just cannot rationalize them making any rash decisions this trade deadline. And the reason I say that is we see these series pile up. The Dodgers series, the Red Sox series. Every sub 500 team the Mets have played in series is this whole entire season that they've lost. Tigers, Rockies, Nationals. We have a losing record against the Nationals, for crying out loud, to this point in the season. A World Series contending team does not let that happen. So yeah, a lot of disappointment to go around. Max Scherzer, he's up and he's down. He thought he found his footing with that slider. He thought he found his footing in general with his mechanical adjustment, and he gets rocked in his very next start against the Red Sox, and it's just very disappointing. The offense, Tommy Pham is hurt, a trade candidate. I would love to keep Tommy Pham, but really, if we're not going to make a push for the playoffs, what good is Tommy Pham going to do this team? Get some prospect value, but it doesn't help that he's hurt. Pete Alonso, we said it yesterday on the roundtable, looking like he's coming around. Jeff McNeil and Lindor. I mean, Lindor is, let's face it, he's not producing ever since the All-Star break. He went in red hot. His July career numbers, we talked about it, Nelson, were something that we could look forward to, and he has not produced that ever since the All-Star break. I'm not sure what's happening there. McNeil, also another guy in his head. Don't know what's happening with McNeil. People are losing their patience with McNeil, and very warranted. That's very warranted. So very disappointing series. It was a series where the Dodgers and the Red Sox series were two series that could have potentially inched the Mets way closer on that bridge to maybe being a respectable wild card team, and it didn't happen, and they folded under those opportunities. And I was going to give them those chances. Now I'm just sitting here like, well, where do we go from here? But that bridges us into our next topic of discussion. The Subway Series kicks off tonight, regardless of how the Mets are doing, poor or well. I'm always looking forward to the Subway Series. The Yankees, crosstown rivals. Not really rivals, I should say, because they're in a different league, obviously. But it's always nice to get some wins against them when the Subway Series does happen. I'm fully expecting a split. I think Justin Verlander actually probably pitches well against them. Their offense has been pretty anemic the last couple of weeks. So, Jay, let's start off with you here. Subway Series preview. Anything you're looking forward in particular? We got Verlander today and Quintana tomorrow, I believe. So, anything in particular you're looking forward to? And then I think they have Domingo Germán and Carlos Rodon, who surprisingly struggled, but the Mets can't hit left-handed pitching. So, what do you expect to see in these two?
Yeah, well, I want to use the word expect, but I'm looking forward to see how Verlander handles his first Subway Series. Again, I'm positive, so I'm thinking that he's going to have a okay performance tonight. I'm also looking forward to Quintana because I think he's been pitching well, so I'd like to see him go out and pitch well tomorrow as well. But what I'm looking forward to the most is how our rookies do in their first Subway Series. So your Alvarez's, Beatty's, Vientos. I wish Mauricio was up here, but I have to wait for that. But yeah, I'm looking forward to see how they handle it, how they perform. Alvarez seems to like the big stage, so I'm thinking that he might have a big game tonight and maybe a big series. But I agree with you. I think it most likely will be a split. I guess I want to say we're evenly matched with the Yankees. They have a better bullpen and they have Cole, so much better starting pitching. But I think offensively we match up well, and hopefully we can do some damage in the Bronx tonight. So looking forward to that. But yeah, mostly for the rookies to get those butterflies out and perform well.
Yeah, I don't think we're seeing Cole today, but Cole's been absolutely on a tear, or not, I mean, this series, but he's been absolutely on a tear this season. And it's unfortunate that he's doing what he's doing. And to Mets talk with Hayden's point yesterday, it's like the Yankees outside of Garrett Cole really have not really produced much. And Aaron Judge, obviously, with his injuries, you can't really say much about him because, I mean, let's face it, Aaron Judge is probably the number 2 best player in the league behind Shohei when he's fully healthy. But other than that, did the rookies? I'm trying to think. I know the Subway Series. It seems like so long ago at Citi Field. Did we see Beatty and Alvarez in that Subway Series or no? I can't remember. Nelson, do you know?
Yeah, I can't
I think
remember.
we. I think we saw. I think we saw Alv. I don't know.
I can't remember off the top of my head, to be honest.
But I
I
was
think when
more
did we play them?
speaking
May.
towards just the atmosphere in the Bronx and how they're going to
Yeah.
handle it, because
Yeah, I was
Yankees
gonna
fans are
say
going to bring it.
in the
Yeah,
Bronx, it's a whole different ball game, and so that for a rookie is going to be a tough sort of mental challenge within itself. And the rookies, they're performing pretty well. I think Beatty needs he needs a little bit of fine tuning, but I think the skill set is definitely there. Certainly not to the point where we're going to send it back to AAA or anything. But Alvarez obviously has been a bright spot with his power, bar none. And he's holding his own back there behind home plate as well, catching the starting pitching. And I really loved what I saw in Justin Verlander's last start. He gave the biggest of hugs to Francisco Alvarez after he pitched a gem, and I just love to see that camaraderie with the rookie out there catching these vet guys, and they're absolutely just loving working with him. So I completely agree with you. That atmosphere is going to be wild in Yankee Stadium. I'm curious as to see how they're going to perform and in the spotlight, no less. So Nelson
yeah.
Subway Series preview, thoughts, opinions, analysis. Maybe not expectations, but what do you at least want to see?
Um, I expect to see a split. Uh, I think Alvarez might have a big series, like Jay said. He seems to step up in the big moments. He thrives when the lights are on. Um, Beatty, we'll see. He's been hitting a little better lately, but he hasn't really taken off the way Alvarez has. I still believe in him. I think he just needs more time. Vientos, I don't even know if we'll see him today. Stewart and Vogelbach are in the lineup, which is a joke if you ask me. But I mean, Buck's just gonna keep doing Buck, and just. I mean, I don't even see. I don't know the point of bringing Vientos up if you're not just gonna let the kid play. I just. And some people say, well, he's not that good anyway. Well, let him prove it. Let him show us whether he is that good or not. Because jerking him around like this, you're not going to figure it out. You're going to be guessing to whether or not he can handle the major league pitching if he doesn't get consistent at bats. So that's frustrating to me. Um, and I hate to go into these games like already on a down note, but it's like I look at that lineup and I'm like, come on, really? DJ Stewart's playing right field and Vogelbach's DHing? Like, come on. I hope Verlander has a good start. His history against the Yankees seems pretty solid. Yankee Stadium's a bandbox, though. They get that ball in the air, the balls can start flying out of the park. Um, Not like they have an ace on the mound either, necessarily. So who knows? Maybe we see like a high scoring game. You never know. I don't know. I just, like I said, I expect to split like you guys. Um, I don't I don't think it changes anything regarding of what we do and the deadline or anything. Like you said, they should sell. Will they? That's a question. That's the $1 million question. Nobody knows. It's you get reports saying they're ready to sell. The other reports say they're not. Other reports say they're still thinking about it. So who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? I mean, this the way this team goes, they could easily take 2 in the Bronx and then get swept by the Nationals just because that's the way the Mets roll. um, it sucks to think that way, but it's just that's the way the season's going. Like whenever they get going, and they get something positive going, and you're like, all right, maybe we can buy in. They just go right back in the gutter. So it's just tough to watch, man. But we'll see. I'm gonna watch the games. I'll never stop watching. Like on the weekends at this point now, I'm like not necessarily like they're not must watch TV. If I got something going on, I'll go do it. But during the week, I'm definitely tuned in and I'm locked in. And obviously, we're doing the content, so we got to pay attention and give our thoughts on the team. And if we're not paying any attention, it's a little harder to do. But yeah, I'll be honest. If this is the kind of season, though, if I wasn't doing this now, I probably would start to check out a little bit just because it's just hard. It's hard to watch the same thing every night and be like, oh yeah, I'm so excited to watch the Mets. It's just, I'm just being honest. I'm not that excited to watch the Mets lately. So I don't know. We'll see. I mean, I want to beat the Yankees no matter what. So hopefully they take two because I can't stand Yankee fans. So there's that.
Chris, before you
Yeah,
go,
no,
can
I
you
could.
jump onto one of his earlier points?
Yeah, go ahead. Feel free.
Yeah, no, just for me, I think it's been a disappointing season, but one of the most disappointing pieces of it has been the handling of Mark Vientos. I don't understand. Yes, he did struggle his first turn in the big leagues, so maybe that warranted him being sent down. But now that he's back up, I don't understand why we can't give him consistent playing time. And if we can't, then we should have just left him down in AAA because I don't know what that does. Because I never played baseball, but I don't know what that does to a young player from a mental perspective. Like, how are you supposed to get good in the MLB if you're not getting at bats? He's not a veteran who can be prepared to take, spot starts and pinch hit. He needs to be playing every day. That's why I think Beatty and especially Alvarez, they've succeeded because they've gotten consistent playing time. So we have the DH, and I just don't get why we keep running out the same players instead of giving Vientos a chance. And if we can't, then again, he should have been just remained in AAA and give someone else should have been given a chance. So that's my one point, and it's just been really disappointing, and I feel bad for the kid.
No, we both do as well, and I was going to get your thoughts on that as well, and kind of go a little bit off of topic here, because I know we're getting into the free agent pitching market next, but we have some time here to discuss. The way that they've handled him has been definitely just absolutely malpractice. He was a guy that I thought that if you're going to trade anybody in the farm system, him being positionless, maybe it was going to be him. And so I'm actually really happy that you gave your thoughts on that because the differences between Vientos coming up and getting spot starts versus Mauricio staying down and remaining in AAA. Oh, you can sugarcoat it, and the Mets front office can sugarcoat it as much as they want, and they can make as many excuses as they want in terms of, oh, we need to get Mauricio some playing time at different positions, second base, left field, or whatnot. But I want to ask you, because we haven't talked about this with you, Jay. What do you think Mauricio still being in AAA indicates? Do you think that they view him as a long-term option? And I say they as in you don't know what the Mets. I should say, do you view him as a long-term option on the Mets? Because we can never predict what the Mets are thinking, right? So would you like to see the Mets stay in on Mauricio? And then there was another topic of discussion yesterday on the Mets Roundtable podcast that we do with some of the other guys. Is the indication if the Mets say they are sellers, right? Say they are sellers at the deadline, and they don't bring up Mauricio at that point, even when they become sellers. Do you think that's an indication of Mauricio being trade bait for this offseason for a potential starting pitcher or whatever they decide to use him in? Are you convinced that they see him as a long-term fit, and would you like to see him stay in the Mets organization?
Okay, so that's a loaded question. I'm going to start with this. I started hearing about Ronnie Mauricio last year in the Dominican League. He won the MVP. I've been following him ever since. If the Mets trade him, that'll be one of the biggest mistakes they can make. I think this guy's going to be a star. He looks like a star. He has the build. Um, I can't at this point. I can't trust the Mets front office when they say he needs time in left field. He needs time to develop defensively because they said the same thing about Alvarez, and it's just not true. Alvarez he's a decent pitcher. He frames well, needs some work, but it's not something that should have held him in AAA because the offense is there. So I don't know. I haven't seen Mauricio every day. Like I'm not watching the AAA games every day, but to me, the highlights I'm seeing, he has like that swag you want to see as far as a young player. So I would like to see him long term. His position, there's left field, second base. He can spot start for Lindor. So there's plenty of spots you can fit him. But honestly, I just don't know how the front office views him because I know they might be thinking of going in a different direction. They might see things that I don't see because they have people watching him on a regular basis. So just for me, in my opinion, I think it would be a mistake. I think he's a long-term player, and I'd like to see him survive the trade deadline. But I don't know what direction. The fact that again, that was one of the other things over the weekend. Once Guillermo went down, I thought it was just a foregone conclusion that we were going to see Mauricio, and because we didn't, I was just like, okay, I don't know how they view them. I don't know what they're going to do with him because he's raking down there. He's can't do anything else down there. He's just biding his time. So for me, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be an interesting trade deadline for the Mets, to say the least.
No, yeah, I agree. I completely agree with you. And the point that you brought up is that, I think he's a long-term option, right? And he doesn't even have to play a position at the major league level to be a long-term option. You have the DH. Vogelback's not going to be here. Ronnie Mauricio's a switch hitter. So one, if he pans out, you have a switch hitter from both sides that you can play every single day, no matter who's on the mound, right? And even if you don't want to do that, maybe they keep Vientos and they platoon Mauricio and Vientos at the major league level for the DH. Because I think the consensus is that Ronnie Mauricio is probably a little bit of a better hitter, more power for sure from the left side, as most switch hitting guys are from the left side. But listen, I completely agree with you. I also think that Ronnie Mauricio is a guy who would be a mistake to trade point blank. I would understand the Mets doing so, and I don't think it happens this trade deadline. I think it would happen in the offseason when there's a little bit better and there was a little bit more time for them to decide and evaluate the market and a lot more guys. Teams are just more in general inclined and willing to trade guys of higher value, I think, in the offseason after they are able to sort of take the second half and sort of think about their long-term plans for their franchise. So I think it happens in the offseason if it does happen, but I think it's a mistake if it does happen because that switch hitting kind of frame, that power that you get from Mauricio, it does not grow on trees. It does not grow on trees. So I completely agree with you. The frame is there too. And if he's a halfway decent fielder in the MLB, which at this point we don't know because we haven't seen him, and if they're not willing to give him a chance, then I guess we'll never know. But even if he's a halfway decent fielder, in comparison to what they're talking about and what they're making him seem to be in the field, then that's already a win. And the same thing for Alvarez, like you said, they're talking about defense, defense, defense. Well, he's lighting it up for the catching position. He's almost flawless from the catching position. And the new rules of the pickoff moves, etc., have increased stolen bases. So there's nothing that he can do from a catching perspective there, and it only makes him harder for his. It only makes it harder for him because he's a rookie, but he's excelled. So, got a couple comments here. Then Nelson will get your thoughts, and we'll move on to the starting pitching free agent market this coming season. Let's see. Stevie Mac 23, shout out him. Honestly, I don't think the front office has any idea of what they want to do at this point. I completely agree. Honestly, it's really hard to predict what the Mets are thinking of doing when they probably don't even know what they want to do themselves. He also says if Mauricio isn't up by mid-August, then I really think he's getting traded in the offseason for sure because there's way too many guys not contributing right now. I completely agree. And when you look at the guys who they have coming up from that middle infield perspective, I don't think Ronnie Mauricio could definitely make the transition to outfield. It's going to be hard for him due to his stature and due to his, I don't think he's the speediest of guys. He can't really cut well. If I had to guess, right? Because I don't watch him every day as well. But you got Jet Williams coming up, 5'6", 175, maybe puts on 10 pounds between now and when he touches the majors. Maybe he turns into a nice little second baseman for us. Because Jeff McNeil, whether you're going to get rid of him before his contract is up or you're going to let the contract ride out, that's right around the time where Jet Williams could probably phase into that second base role. And then you got Mr. Colin Houck, who just got drafted this year as well. Probably going to be seeing some time at second base in the minors as well, because you got Francisco Lindor here for another 9 years to a decade, whatever it is left on his contract. So we'll see what happens there. And then lastly, to put the finishing touches on the moves of this front office this last week. But guys, we have Danny Mendick. We don't need Ronnie Mauricio, Billy Epler, probably. Yeah, Danny Mendick is not it, and I hate it. But I just can't fathom it. But anyways, we'll see shortly enough whether they really value Mauricio in this farm system or not long term by their decision to bring him up or leave him down in the minors after the trade deadline. Nelson, Mauricio thoughts? Anything groundbreaking that you want to say about Mauricio before we get into free agent pitching market?
Honestly, at this point, there's nothing left to say. The front office is going to do what they're going to do. They apparently think, I think Epler's quote was, he thinks there's still some hitting benchmarks he needs them to do in AAA, whatever that means. I have no idea. And then they want to see him at second and left field more. So I'm just going to take it for what it's worth, and that's what it is. And I honestly think if we don't see him after the deadline at some point, then he probably is going to become a trade piece, just because I would think you'd want to at least see what he can give you heading into next season if you're going to keep him. But that's pretty much where I'm at with it. It's getting frustrated to keep talking about him just because it's obvious like they have no interest in bringing him up regardless of what the fans want. So we're stuck watching the Danny Mendix and DJ Stewarts of the world. So it is what it is.
Yeah,
Guys,
right.
I just had one question. Do you think the decision not to bring him up is being made from a financial perspective? So
I
not
would
calling
think
him up
that if
too
the owner
early.
wasn't Steve Cohen.
Huh? I didn't hear you, Nelson.
Sorry, I said I would think that if the owner wasn't Steve Cohen. If we were still in the Wilpon days where we were pinching pennies for every little thing, then yeah. But Steve Cohen just spent $4 million on Trevor Gott he cut a guy just for $4 million just to get Trevor Gott. So is he really pinching pennies over Mauricio? I mean, maybe. I think more. I guess maybe it's more of a service. I mean, if you want to argue, they just want the extra service time for him, and it's not so much the money; it's more the they want to be able to manipulate the service time a little bit. I don't know, but
because that's the only thing
I
I
just
can
really
think
think
of.
it's
Because if he is a star and they're just trying to hold up with calling him up so we get more service time, so then we can delay free agency a bit longer. That's the only thing. That's my only thought, and that pops in my head every time. Like I think about the Mauricio situation. So I just wanted to get your guys' thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's certainly a possibility. I wouldn't think, but who knows? I really don't know with this front office. I don't know what they're thinking.
Yeah, I think I don't think it's so much as that as if they and yeah, I'll finish that thought and I'll put that comment up. But I don't think it's so much of that as it is the Mets really are probably intending on trading him, to be honest with you. He's a major league ready talent right now. Let's be honest. He's a major league ready talent right now. And I think that the Mets are very much aware that they still have the pieces to win a World Series in 2024, regardless of how this season is going, and they are going to leverage the positionless guys. And let's face it, Mauricio's the number one option now because they haven't brought him up yet. They have not really devalued him, right? They haven't really devalued him like they have Mark Vientos. So if you can go out there and trade Ronnie Mauricio in a package, whatever package it may be, to go get someone in the offseason, like a starting pitcher, like whoever you want to do it from the whoever you want to say from the offensive side, whoever's shopping their players, the White Sox might be shopping a boatload of guys in the offseason. So whether it's Dylan Cease or whether it's their offensive players that are going to be on the market, that's a possibility. And Ronnie Mauricio is probably going to be the main ask from the Mets, from anybody. Doesn't even mean it's the White Sox. It means from anybody. So I think it's more of that. And that's why my mind in terms of Mauricio is that, like, I think that he's getting traded. Like I said, it's not going to happen this deadline. I think it's a little bit too soon and too rash for them to make a decision at this deadline in terms of Ronnie Mauricio. But in the offseason, we can definitely see it probably potentially happening. And I already said from the start that I wasn't on board with that. But like I said, who knows what the Mets front office is dealing with in terms of their processes. So Stevie Mack says Jet Williams already has 31 stolen bases and 66 walks. Just absolutely insane. Yeah, Jet Williams is a stud, man. I'm telling you, he has some high upside. Like I said, his stature is not really going to impress a lot of people. I think he's only 5'6", maybe borderline 5'7". He weighs only 175 right now. If he puts on 10 to 15 more pounds, maybe hits the weight room a little bit, I think he's a viable second base option moving forward at the major league level. That's definitely where I'd slot him in at. Obviously, he got drafted as a shortstop, but that transition from shortstop to second base is a little bit easier than a shortstop to the outfield. Although shortstops are notoriously athletic, so they can play pretty much anywhere on the diamond, you would think. But with Mauricio's frame, the difference is the frame between Mauricio and Jet Williams, right? Mauricio is 6'5", Jet Williams is 5'6". A lot more nimble, a lot more athletic. And he can play that second base middle infield position. So that's the difference right there. And who knows? Maybe that's what the front office is thinking as well. So who actually knows what this front office is thinking? They have a lot to decipher, and that's why I don't envy their position. As much as I will rag on Billy Epler, any chance I get, I don't envy that position without the president of baseball operations providing some structure there. So appreciate Stevie Mack for the input for those comments. And yeah, let's get into it because this gets into our next topic. This trade deadline is automatically for the Mets going to influence the free agent pitching market and their interest in starting pitchers in the offseason. Obviously, we saw some reports. Whether they're bogus or not, we don't know at this point. I think they are because I simply think contractually wise, guys like Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander, and maybe Quintana's a different story, but Max Scherzer and Justin Verlander contractually are not going to be movable in terms of the ease of movability at this deadline. And Max Scherzer, like I've been saying, will probably be like a 3-4 type for the Mets rotation next season. You got Senga that's coming along. You got Verlander who's already going to be there. If they go out and trade a guy like Ronnie Mauricio for a nice starting pitcher with a couple years of control, he'll probably be the 3 or even 2. And Max Scherzer, making $43 million a year, will probably be our number 4 if I had to count on it next season. So I know there's some reports saying that teams are interested in Scherzer and Verlander. I just don't think the money works. I don't think it's wise to let go of guys and have to pay their entire salary, even though Steve Cohen probably would do it. I think they've got probably like what, 25 mil plus remaining on this season, and you're not even counting in next season, their $40+ million of next season salary cap, because there's not many teams who are going to want to pay a 39, 40-year-old pitcher $40 million of their next year's salary. So it's just really hard to think about. So I think the Mets, what they have to do is look at the free agent pitching market. Obviously, we know that Shohei Ohtani is the number one option for the offseason. We know that. But let's look at some of the other names here. And shout out Nelson, because I'm going to read off right off his list that he sent me. We got Blake Snell, Aaron Nola, Martin Perez, Julio Urias, Giolito, And then you got some other guys. There's like B-level guys, I think fifth starters. You got Jack Flaherty. You got Julio Teheran, who's having a nice little season for himself in Milwaukee right now. Sonny Gray. And then you got your Kershaw, Syndergaard, and Wainwright, who I want no part of because we don't need that sort of age on our roster anymore. So obviously it remains to be seen what's going to happen with Carlos Quintana. He has a little bit more of a movable contract. He's getting paid 2 years, $20 million, I believe, somewhere around that ballpark, maybe a $10 to $12 million cap hit, which is easily movable for Steve Cohen. And if he pitches well in this Yankees series, and I think that's what might need to happen for him to be moved because he pitched really well in his last start, to Jay's point earlier. If you want some prospects and some guys need a 4 or 5 on their rotation right now who are a little bit more in it than the Mets, maybe they call up the Mets to trade for Quintana. Who knows? We'll see what happens with that. But any of the guys that I just named on the free agent pitching market, besides Shohei Ohtani, Jay, or just the rotation in general going forward into the offseason, when you take a look at Verlander, Senga, and Scherzer, who are locks to be here, Quintana, we'll see. He's scheduled to be here. We'll see if that happens. And Carlos Carrasco's gone. So would you prefer the Mets? I guess my question is here to sort of look for that 4 or 5 starter, or maybe even potential 2 or 3 in the offseason and free agency? Or are you comfortable with relying, and this might be a little bit of a cliche question because we know how bad he's done so far this season, maybe like a David Peterson to give him another shot? What do you think on the starting rotation and the state of the starting rotation right now going into the offseason?
Well, I think, well, I would hope the front office and Mr. Cohen would have learned some lessons from this year's free agency. I think everyone got a little excited, and they forgot the mistakes of not only the Mets, but just teams in the past that kind of tried to buy a championship and get all of the best players available during free agency. So shout out to Nelson for providing the list, because I think for 2024, they should kind of like dial back and look at pitchers like a Giolito. Young, won't cost you too much. You probably sign him on a decent contract and just fill. And he's not too old. I think he's like, correct me if I'm wrong, 29, 30. So he's still fairly young. So he can give you some good years. So maybe like a 4 or 5 year contract, but something decent, nothing too crazy. And I think they should look at players like that who can give you length, because that's what we sorely lack, especially this year. Our starters, they're older. They can't consistently give us those 5, 6, 7 innings that other successful teams are getting. So I would hope for this round of free agency that they would look at more players like that, do more research, look at the player's performance from the previous year, and just get more guys that can give you innings, get you solid innings. They don't have to like be the dominant like big names out there. Obviously, everyone wants Ohtani. I don't know where. No one's really thinking about where Ohtani wants to go though, because he did choose LA. So I see a lot of discussions about the Mets and the Yankees and which team's going to get him, but I just don't know where his head's at and where he wants to go. So I'm not really thinking about Ohtani for the Mets. I'm thinking more mid-level starters, get back to looking at those guys, and we'll see what happens with Scherzer and Verlander at the trade deadline. I'm with you, Chris. I don't see any responsible team taking on those heavy contracts, even if they're in the playoff hunt. The only way I see it is that the Mets are going to have to take on some of that contract. So let's say Verlander goes out today, does another 6, 7 innings. So teams start calling the Mets and are interested. I can see them trading for him, but we'll probably have to take on a portion of that contract. That's the only way that gets done. But for Max, I think we're just stuck with him. And to your point, 4th or 5th starter, and just deal with it. It's a mistake, but that's something we'll just have to eat.
Yeah, and you have to just eat it at this point, right? You just have to eat it. You paid the contract, and they're not performing up to expectations. We'll get Nelson's thoughts here in a second because I'm curious about this. He mentioned something yesterday about Verlander's clause in his contract, and I don't want
No
to
trade
quote him
clause,
on
yeah.
it. And about the salary for Verlander next year, I'm not sure. Do you know anything about that, Jay?
I know Verlander has a no trade clause, so they would have to negotiate with him before any trade gets done.
Nelson, what was that clause you were talking about yesterday?
So it's not a clause per se. It's the fact that his salary for um or his contract for not 2024 but 2025 is not necessarily guaranteed. He's got to hit certain benchmarks and whatnot to like for that option to click in. So because it's not guaranteed, the Mets are not allowed to pay any money towards it. So if a team trades for him, the Mets can pay next year's contract, but they wouldn't be allowed to kick in any money for the year after. So that makes it harder to trade him because who wants to take on all that money for his last year of his contract? It's just something that I saw come up on Twitter. Um, yeah, so if anything, I would think Scherzer might be the more logical one that might get traded, but I like you guys. I don't see them. I don't see either one of them going anywhere. So there's that.
Yeah. Yeah, I just looked that up too. It's because Justin Verlander has something called a vested his contract for that third year is vested, and whatever that means, I have no idea because it's the first time I'm hearing about it. But I think what Nelson is saying is definitely factually correct. Is that the Mets, since it's not guaranteed, the Mets will have to pay that base salary, which is going to be a $35 million payroll hit. If they're over the luxury, it's going to be another 43. So I completely forgot because I was under the assumption that was just a general 2-year deal. I completely forgot that we might have him for that third year as well. So that's a good point to it. So that's also something certainly to think about in terms of a trade and these reports going around that are probably bogus surrounding Justin Verlander at this point. And to my point too, like Justin Verlander helps you win a World Series next year, right? Regardless of how well he performs this year, like you still could use him if you're going to pay him that money and you're going to have to whatever eat money in a trade or whatever, however many bogus amount that a team wants you to eat on that contract next year, you might as well just keep him. And, unless they're giving up top prospects, which I highly doubt a team is going to do at this point for Justin Verlander, he can help you win something. He can help you win a lot of games next year and return to form, hopefully. So there's just something to think about from both sides of the fence. We got some comments in here. Hey, Amish for you, Nelson, right here. We got
Yeah, what's up,
Nelson's fans in the building. And then Stevie Mack, need another grinder for the starting rotation or bullpen. Bassett and Trevor Williams were unsung heroes last year. Completely agree. Bassett type. I don't think the Mets were wanted to Bassett. So it gets to the point where you're like, we've seen these pitchers choke in the bigger moments, right? Bassett was certainly one of them, not only in the Braves series down the stretch, but also the Padres series. We want workhorses, but we want workhorses, and we might be asking for too much at this point. And I don't know if it's too much to ask for because we want a workhorse that can perform in the spotlight. And I just don't know, minus the Shohei Otanis, minus the Dylan Ceases via trade. Aaron Nola could be one too, although maybe not so much. Like, who is New York ready to step in the spotlight and perform when it comes time to perform? It hasn't been Max. Verlander, will see if he can still be that. I'm not closing the book on that just yet. We will see. But yeah, the Mets are going to have to think about methodically and slowly start turning this rotation over into some youth. The Braves have had a very good luxury of doing that, and their rotation looks pretty solid in terms of youth and veteran presence. They got Charlie Moore and veteran, and they got a couple of young guys over there as well. Max Fried is approaching the prime of his career. We'll see what the situation with him in Atlanta is going to be. But the Mets need to start trending towards youth all across the board. We've seen that from the offensive side of the ball already. We need to see that in the rotation now. We got guys like Mike Vasil that are going to be coming up as well. Obviously, some guys in the lower leagues of the minor leagues. Blade Tidwell is a name to be watching out for. But those guys, I mean, Vassell maybe next year you can say and make the argument for him being on the opening day roster. But definitely Blade Tidwell and any other pitcher that just got drafted this year, which were there were plenty for the Mets, are not going to be making their way up for another 3-4 years. So we'll see what contributions we get out. We'll see how the Mets approach the next intermediary, the next 3-4 years of intermediary, I guess spots or roster spots, you should say, in that rotation. You got also the guy that we haven't mentioned, the Japanese guy. I'm blanking on his name right now, but Billy Epler just went over there to go scout, who's killing it in the Japanese league. And that Epler obviously has ties to these Japanese players as well, somehow, some way, with his Otani connection. And obviously they inked Senga to a deal this past offseason. So we'll see what happens with that. The Mets need to get younger, all through and through. They need to just start producing when the time comes to produce. I think that's just been the general problem this year. But fellas, let's get some closing thoughts here. It's been a really good episode. We got into some good topics of discussion. We'll see how the Subway Series plays out tonight. Jay, first and foremost, let me get your closing remarks, not only on what we've been talking about today, but just the Mets in general, and stuff that you're doing on your Twitter, YouTube. If you're doing any content, shout yourself out, and just tell us about what you got going on.
Yeah, I'm just really grateful for you guys for having me on. I think we had a really good discussion. So I appreciate that. Again, I'm on Twitter, YouTube. As far as content, most of it is on YouTube. I do hype videos and things of that nature. So check me out, like and subscribe. And if you have any feedback or if you have any ideas on what direction I should be going into, I'm welcome to that as well. So appreciate the support there. As far as the Mets, again, I'm going to stay positive. To Amish's point, if I wasn't doing the social media stuff, I would not be as engaged, to be honest. But since I am going to be locked in to every game. I just want to see how they do over the course of the entire season. So my expectations are not high. I'm not giving up, though, because, Chris, to your point, it's only 7 games. We've seen it too many times. We've seen it with the Phillies, Braves. We've seen it too many times where teams just get hot at the right moment and they make the wild card and they make things happen in the playoffs. So it'll be interesting to see not only that, but also what happens at the trade deadline with Mauricio, what we do with the pieces that have been out there, like Icana's, Starling Marte's. I don't know how much we can get back, but it'll just be interesting to see what Epler can do during the trade deadline. So I'm looking forward to that. And yeah, I still hope we can be sellers at the deadline, but still be in contention, if that makes sense. So that's where my head's at. So we'll see what happens. And yeah, let's go Mets. Hopefully they could get a win tonight.
No, and I definitely agree. It's a point where obviously after the deadline, you need to think about obviously not only the playoffs and gaining some momentum there, and anything can happen, like you said, but also as a Mets fan, just scouting what could happen and scouting these players who are coming up from AAA, presumably, or even still in the major league roster of who can be there for 2024 and produce, and just forward thinking there, and make your own educated assumptions on that. So I definitely agree with that point. And, to your point, like you said, definitely grateful for having you on as well. Whenever you want to make this happen again, we'll definitely have that happen as well. Nelson, final thoughts from you, buddy.
Yeah, so I didn't really get to touch on that last topic, but so I'll just use my final thoughts for that. As far as free agent pitching is concerned, I mean, the Mets, if they don't trade any of their starters, they're locked. Four of the 5 spots are locked in anyways. So are any of those guys on the market guys that I'm clamoring for? Not really. Shohei's the guy. If you can get Shohei, he obviously solves 2 huge issues. Locks in as your ace and he's your DH. Those aren't a problem anymore. If you can't get Shohei, then things get a little trickier. I like what I see out of that Japanese kid. We've had success with Senga.
maybe we just sign him and call it a day. We have Vassell waiting in the wings. If he's needed, I don't believe in Peterson or McGill, so I don't think they're going to help us much. So that's where I mean, the only other guy I would maybe look into is Urias, just because he's younger. I don't want to sign one of these aging starters. I'm just not enthused by any of those guys. Most of the names, I'm honestly not. Aaron Nola, I have no desire. I don't want him on my team. So that's my thoughts on that. Thanks, Jay, for coming on. We appreciate you. Thanks you for always watching. And anytime you want to hop on again, please let us know. I saw you pop it on there, my Twitter. Yep. Give me a follow on Twitter at Amish Country Met. If you're not watching on my channel, please hop over, subscribe to at Amish Country Mets fan. I'm almost to 200. I'm creeping to 200 subscribers. So if you could help me get there, I'd appreciate it. Thank you as always, Chris. It's been fun, and we'll see. Let's go Mets. Hopefully we get at least one against the Yankees.
Definitely. And like you said, we'll see what happens tonight. It would be always good to get one against the Yankees. Yeah, go shout out myself too. Subscribe to the YouTube at CPNY Sports. I got my Twitter, Instagram going as well as CPNY Sports. So I got all that good stuff, but primarily follow the guys right beside me, Jay and Nelson. They're doing some good stuff. Definitely grateful to have them on beside me talking some Mets in the lowest of times, where we need to have some positivity, but also have some rationality and some realistic expectations as well. So I appreciate both their insights, and we'll definitely have Jay back on. As for Nelson and I, we will be back on Friday at 4 p.m. I am TBD for that, Nelson. I might need you to do a little solo session for me as well one more time, but we will see what happens there. It is TBD, but just don't be alarmed if you see Nelson's face, lonely face on the screen. So appreciate you guys as always. Let's go Mets, and we will see you on Friday.
Let's go Mets.
Thank you for watching the Interstate Mets Report, streaming Tuesdays at 5 p.m. and Fridays at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to at Amish Country Mets Fan and at CPNY Sports.